podcast that tells the stories from folklore and mythology around the world with all the sex and violence left in. Today, we are going to be talking about Aladdin and his wonderful lamp. I don't know if anybody was here last year. We talked about Hades, specifically looking at Disney's Hercules and everything that is wrong with it. And spoiler alert, it's a lot. That audio is up on the website, up on the podcast feed if anybody wants it. So feel free. Today's panel will be PG-ish because it's still not dark enough, but the podcast, I assure you, not. We're on mythology.com and pretty much anywhere you find podcasts, we should be. And if we're not, we need to be. So, we are going to be talking about Aladdin. Something old, something new, something borrowed, and something blue, all of which refers to the genie. The version that most of us are familiar with at this point is the 1992 animated film with the incomparable Robin Williams. That was my first introduction to the story. I'm sure that's probably a lot of people's first real introduction to the story. They recently remade it as a live-action film, as I'm sure you're aware, which I felt like that makes this a good time to talk about the story. It's a little bit different than the 90s animated film, but pretty much a rehash with a couple new bits thrown in. The 90s film, in my opinion, is classic peak Disney. It's an outstanding cast. It's got just memorable, fantastic numbers, fantastic animation that still holds up. I went back and watched it not that long ago for this panel. It still holds up. It's still a really good movie. But it's also barely recognizable as being the same story as the original. Disney's Aladdin is absolutely guilty of Disney's tendency to take old stories, twist them, and mix them with other things until they don't resemble at all what they used to be. But it's hard to blame them because the original story is cray-cray. I feel like I can safely assume you've probably seen one of the two films, but you may or may not have heard the story from 1001 Arabian Nights, so we're going to briefly go through that, just so you know kind of what the craziness is. The full version is up in episode 42 of the podcast, which is already up and active. So Aladdin and His Wonderful Lamp is one of the stories from the 1001 Nights, also known as Arabian Nights, also known as 1001 Arabian Nights, depending on which version you go with. It's a collection of Middle Eastern folk tales which were originally from the oral tradition, and they were collected mostly during the Islamic Golden Age. The basic frame story tells the story of Shahriyar, whose name means ruler of the realm, who is a king who ruled in India and in China. He learns that his brother's wife is cheating on him, and so then he goes and investigates his wife and finds out that she's cheating on him even harder. And so he comes to the natural conclusion that no women can ever be trusted. They're all going to cheat on him. So he decides he's going to still have to be married, though, because he's king. So he'll just marry a virgin every night, sleep with her, and then kill her in the morning. Problem solved. The problem he did not foresee was that you very quickly run out of virgins. The women either left or died off, or just whatever. Maybe they just went, oh, we're going to have a fling now because I don't want to be part of this. So quickly, the vizier realizes he can't find anyone else for the daily sacrifice, so he's probably going to be the one that gets killed next. So his virgin daughter, Scheherazade, decides that she is going to sacrifice herself. She is going to take the bullet and she is going to marry the king. But she's not a complete idiot. She has a plan. They get through the wedding night and they get there ready to go to bed, and she's like, okay, you know what? We had a fun night. Let me tell you a story. I got a story for you. And she starts spinning a story, gets to a really good part, is like, it's getting late. I think I'm going to hit the hay. And the king is like, well, I got to know what happens. I can't. All right, fine. You can live another day, but as long as you finish the story tomorrow. And she's like, that's fine. I'll finish the story tomorrow. She gets through the story and is like, well, we got time. Let's start another one. And so on and so forth. This continues on for 1001 nights, hence the name of the tale. And it's just a wild collection of random stories. He's basically an early prototype incel, but what you gonna do? Weirdly, if you actually go through and read the 1001 Nights, some of the stories end at very bizarre, boring moments, which you don't think would be a thing that would keep you aching for the next part of the story, but somehow it works. like there's one that literally stops in the middle of an in-depth discussion on the metaphysics of humanity and stops there. Nothing exciting happened, no cliffhangers, but he has to know how that discussion ends. He just has to. So the different versions have a little bit different endings depending on which one you go with. Some versions, she asked for pardon. Some versions, he sees the children that they now have because they've been living together for years at this point. He just kind of forgets he was going to murder her at one point, where he's just like, it's been years, he's forgotten. This is just now their nightly ritual. So, happy ending? So Aladdin is one of the orphan tales that's included in 1001 Nights, which means it's actually not, it doesn't actually have an authentic Arabian source. There is no classic tale that corresponds to this. The other story that's like this is one you also probably know, Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves. The two that you know best don't belong at all. They were added to later translations. Aladdin shows up for the first time in 1710 in the translation by Antoine Galland, who heard the story from a Syrian storyteller in Aleppo named Yohanna Diab. And most historians think the guy just straight up made it up himself, loosely based on his own life, and the guy went, that sounds right, we'll throw it in there. The story of Aladdin was actually originally set in China, technically. But the guy who was spinning the story had never been to China, knew nothing about China, and so it doesn't look anything like China. They don't have an emperor, they have a I forget the word now. A sultan, thank you. They don't have anything that's Chinese at all. It's all Middle Eastern. So most people, when they go through and actually do the story, they set it in the Middle East because it really should be, even though it's technically China. The story opens with Mustafa the tailor struggling to keep his business afloat. It'd be a lot easier to keep to make ends meet if his lazy, good-for-nothing son Aladdin would help out. That's right, Aladdin's got a dad. He is not an orphan. His son refuses to help, choosing to play in the streets while his father works himself to death. Literally. The guy has a heart attack from broken heart from his son being such a wastrel and a lot of sleepless nights, and he drops dead. Aladdin's mom, that's right, he's also got a mom. They're both alive. Is now taking over the business, trying to keep it afloat. But again, she's really struggling because one person is really can't keep up this tailoring business by themselves. About this time, the brother of the dead Mustafa, who no one's ever met before, shows up and is like, "Hey, Aladdin, my dear nephew." And he's like, "I don't know who you are. I'm your uncle." Okay. Surprise, surprise, he's not. He's an evil magician who has come to town because with all of his research and all of his studying, he has found out there is a magical artifact somewhere here, and he needs a dupe. Aladdin is not a diamond in the rough. He's not special in any way. He's just real dumb. And so he goes through this whole charade, pretends that he is their uncle, and goes, "Oh, you want to start a tailoring business, huh? I actually happen to know of this really convenient thing which can make you a lot of money. I was going to get it, but I need help. How about you help me and I'll get you set up?" So they travel out into the desert, way out into the desert, to the point where Aladdin is like, "We're not going to be able to get back before sundown. Is that okay?" And he's like, it's fine, don't worry about it. He gives Aladdin a magical ring to open up the Cave of Wonders, and he goes down. And much like in the Disney version, he's not allowed to touch any of the treasure. There is, however, these weird magical underground trees with fruit on them, somehow, that he plucks and takes in his bag because he might want a snack later. He hasn't eaten today. He gets the lamp, goes back up, and the evil magician is like, "Hey, give me the lamp." And he's like, "Hey, let me out of here." And he's like, "No, well then I'm not giving you the lamp." And you would think he would just go, "Okay, I'll help you out and then I'll kill you." But instead, he decides in a fit of pique to just seal off the whole thing and write it off as a bad business. For some reason. I don't know. Whatever. So Aladdin sits around for about 2 days, just kind of starving, being depressed. He ends up finally praying for help and accidentally rubs the ring. Not the lamp, the ring. And out pops a genie. Turns out the magical ring the magician gave him had a genie in it already. And so he asks the genie to get him out, and he does, because there's no 3-wish limit. There's none of that is in the original story. You can get infinite wishes from the genie, and that's totally cool. So he ends up going back home finally after several days. His mom's been worried sick, wondering what happened to him. And he shows up, starving, collapses in the door, face down. She drags him in, revives him, and he's like, oh, I really need food. And she's like, well, we don't have any food. I've been looking for you for 2 days, so I haven't worked, so I didn't buy anything, so we broke. So his mom offers to, again, they forget they have this bag full of fruit. They just decide they're going to go sell that lamp because it's probably worth something, right? But to make sure that it's going to look good, she starts to shine it up before they go out, and out pops a second genie, a different genie, who they decide they're going to order food from, like their own personal Uber. The food appears on these silver platters. They eat the food, and they're like, hey, we can just sell these silver platters and make money. Cool. And that's what they do for years. That's it. They've got an all-powerful genie, and all they do is make silver so they can sell it. They could have just skipped the middleman and made themselves money, or no, they're going to go the hard way about this and do nothing else. One day, it comes down that the princess of the kingdom wants to take a bath in the city. For some reason. Don't ask. You figure she's probably got plenty of baths in the palace, but no, I don't know, whatever. Anyway, whatever it takes, she is coming to town. And to do this, though, because she's a special, important person, they're going to have to shut down the whole town. No one's going to be able to come out of their doors. No one's going to be able to take a peek at her because you can't see her face. You can't see her at all. And Aladdin goes, I got to see this girl now. So he goes and sneaks into the bathhouse, sneaks an eyeful, maybe more than just her face. It doesn't say so, but he's kind of a creeper, so I wouldn't put it past him. And he decides he is absolutely, desperately in love with her right then and there, and sends his mom to go and ask the Sultan to let her marry him. Which she's like, we're like super poor. They're not gonna go for this. And he's like, oh, hey, I have this magical fruit from the cave that I forgot about until just now. Let's go get it. Turns out that fruit is not fruit, it's giant gemstones that never got mentioned before, but it's giant gemstones. Just roll with it. So she takes these with her to kind of go, hey, we're better than we look? Cool. And so she sits there for 6 days, every day, waiting for them to notice her. And finally the Sultan's like, hey, this lady's been here every day just kind of waiting. Vizier, go find out what she wants. And so they do. She tells him that she wants her son to marry his daughter. He laughs. She pulls out the giant gemstone. He stops laughing. Now the Vizier had plans himself for his son to marry the princess and become the new Sultan. And he's been working on this for a long time. This is a culmination of years of planning. He's expected his son to become the Sultan. And he's not so cool with this. So he convinces the king to give him a 3-month grace period to see if anyone else can come up with a better price, can meet these giant magical gemstones bigger than anything anyone's ever seen before. And the Sultan's like, that seems fair. I don't really care about my daughter as a person, just how much she's worth to me, so cool, let's see if anyone can top this price. Aladdin's mom goes back, tells him the news, and he's like, all right, fine, I guess I can wait 3 months. Except that 2 months later, his mom hears, oh, the princess is getting married, and they're like, wait, what now? Turns out, somehow the Vizier did come up with a better price. How? Don't know. What? Don't know. Not important. And so Aladdin decides he's going to crash this wedding. He waits until they've technically gotten married. They're going to the bridal suite for the first time. They're both naked. They're both in bed. And then he has the genie pull the whole bed out of the room and into his house with both naked people in it. Then he takes the naked groom-ish and sends him out in the desert to just be naked in the desert. And then gets in bed with the princess and just goes to sleep. According to the story, you make up your own mind. She does not sleep. She lies there terrified because a strange man has abducted her with magic and kicked her husband out, again with magic. He might be dead. She doesn't know. So she lies there all night, just terrified. In the morning, Aladdin wakes up and is like, it's a good night's sleep. Okay, Genie, send them back. And so they reappear back in the tower, naked, in bed, none the wiser from anyone else. Except when the king comes in to try to congratulate them on their presumably happy wedding night, the vizier's son is hiding in a cabinet, and his daughter is lying there shivering and comatose with a 1,000-yard stare. And so he asks her, what's going on? She's too traumatized to speak, because who wouldn't be? He finally sends in her mom to get the story, and she tells him all things like, oh, don't worry, it was just a dream. You're fine. It was just a dream. You'll be okay. And so he goes back the next night. Aladdin summons them again, sends the guy out naked in the desert. And the next morning, again, she's traumatized because this is happening again. And as far as she knows, it's going to happen every night for the rest of her life. And this time, the Sultan ain't having this. So he's like, okay, either you tell me what's happening or I'm going to kill you. And that works, because apparently threat of imminent death is more scary than Aladdin. So he tells her the whole story, and he's like, oh, that's right, there was that guy that I said you were gonna marry who had, oopsie. So he summons Aladdin's mother again, and he's like, oh, that's right, I forgot, you were also really poor, that's why I didn't go through with this. So he and the vizier decide to set a price for them that there's no way they could possibly match, never mind the fact that they just showed up with gigantic gemstones. And of course, so he asks for 40 baskets filled with jewels carried by 40 white slaves, leading 40 black slaves, all dressed in finery fit for a sultan. And Aladdin's like, easy. I got a genie. And so the whole procession comes in, surrounds the sultan, all of the slaves looking inward with their arms crossed, and he's like, okay, I'm scared now. You can marry her. And at this point, Aladdin's like, now hold on a second. I can't marry your daughter until I got a palace fit for a princess. How long did that take? About a day. So sure enough, overnight, the palace just appears. Bigger than the Sultan's palace, built with walls of silver and gold, with 24 windows set with diamonds and rubies. It's ridiculously luxurious. And the vizier is immediately going, okay, come on, that was magic, right? That was magic. And the Sultan's like, it wasn't magic. You're crazy. He's like, a palace appeared overnight, made of solid gold and jewels, magic. And he's like, don't worry about it, it's not. And so he has one window of the 24 that is not finished. And the Sultan's like, oh, you missed something. He's like, oh, no, that's for you. I figured that you could have the honor of finishing out the window and finishing up our stuff. And he's like, oh, that's a cool idea. I like that. I like that idea. So he's going to set everyone in the kingdom to do that, which is going to take a whole lot of money. But in the meantime, they do go ahead and get married. And according to the story, the princess is so happy about meeting Aladdin that she totally forgets her abject terror of the last couple of days. I don't know that I buy it. I think maybe she was just going along to get along because this guy could probably just kill her with a blink. But the story says that she's cool with it. So he does apologize for his behavior, by which I mean he says that he's sorry if she was offended, but it's her fault for being so beautiful, which is not an apology. But Aladdin is not much of a hero. So the Sultan is trying to finish up this window, and he has used up every jewel in the kingdom. They've borrowed heavily, used up everything in the surrounding kingdoms. They got nothing. They cannot seem to get this to work. And finally, the Aladdin is like, okay, you know what? It's fine. Take it back, and I'll finish it. And sure enough, overnight, it's finished. And so again, the vizier is like, okay, magic, right? This is magic. And the Sultan's like, oh yeah, that was definitely magic. And the Sultan's like, the vizier's like, really? This is what convinced you? Not the palace appearing overnight. The window. All right, whatever. At least you're on board now. So all of these wonders have spread to Africa now. The news is reached out, and that's where the evil magician happens to live. And he's like, oh, hey, a guy doing impossible things? I bet he's got a genie. I bet it's that guy that I thought I killed, but maybe I didn't kill him so good. So he shows up again. And he comes back and he listens in town a little bit and he finds out what's going on. He's like, oh, the giant palace? Yeah, that's definitely where he lives. So he waits until Aladdin goes hunting, which royals do a lot. And he comes through dressed as this old merchant with a big bucket of brand new shiny lamps going, new lamps for old! New lamps for old! And everyone's like, you're crazy, old man. You're giving away brand new lamps for beat up crappy ones. You're insane, but I'll take that deal. So he gets a huge crowd following him by the time he gets to the palace, attracts their attention, and they're like, oh, hey, there is that weird beat-up lamp that's just in the middle of the palace. It doesn't really fit. Let's sell it. Let's give it to him and get a nice new lamp. That'd be cool, right? And because Aladdin, not a very good husband, hasn't told her about the lamp, there's no reason not to. So she does. She just gives it to the magician. And he races out of town, rubs it, summons the genie. He's like, awesome. Kidnap the entire palace and take it to Africa where I'm from. So the entire palace with the princess and everyone inside, poof, gone. Aladdin comes back, and the Sultan is freaked out because his daughter is just missing. And naturally enough, they blame Aladdin, because who wouldn't at this point? And they're like, okay, we're gonna kill you for bringing back the princess, for kidnapping the princess. Which sort of defeats, you didn't ask him where the princess was, you didn't give him a chance to bring her back, she's just gone forever and you're not going to do anything about that, but you're not the most forward-thinking king, so I'll let it slide. However, Aladdin, being a commoner with literally magical endless supplies of money, has become the best friend of the common people because he throws money around like it's free because to him it is. So they quickly hear that he's about to be executed and they storm the palace. And the vizier and the sultan are like, oh, we kill him, you kill us. Got it. On second thought, we're going to show mercy. And Aladdin, because again, not the brightest bulb in the barn, says, okay, how about this? You give me 30 days to find her, and if you can't, I'll come back voluntarily, and then you can kill me. And he's like, well, you just gotten out of execution scot-free, but sure, we'll kill you if you really want us to. So he goes off for a grand total of 3 days, basically running around going, dude, where's my wife? Nobody knows. Nobody has any idea where the palace is because it vanished. He decides it's a bad thing. He can't possibly find her. So he goes down to the river and he's going to kill himself. But before he does, he decides to pray for forgiveness for the fact that he's about to kill himself and accidentally rubs the ring that he's still wearing and totally forgot about. He's got another genie. So he asks the genie to bring back his wife, and the genie's like, I'm not that powerful. And then he's like, oh, that's why he wanted the other genie. The other genie is stronger. Cool. Could have explained that sooner. But how about if you can't bring them here, can you bring me there? And he's like, yeah, I can do that. And so he appears outside the palace. And they quickly decide, he quickly finds the princess, and they come up with the cunning plan of poisoning the magician. The magician the whole time has been trying to convince the princess to marry him. She's like, no, I'm already kind of married, so no. And he's like, nah, that dude's totally not coming for you. If he hasn't by now, he's not going to. So they decide she's just going to pretend that she suddenly had a change of heart and is super into the dude that kidnapped her. It worked for Aladdin, right? The magician totally buys into it, has no doubts whatsoever, swallows the wine she gives him without thinking about it during a long-winded toast, drops dead. No more evil magician. So Aladdin goes and retrieves the lamp, still not telling Jasmine what the lamp is or how he got here or any of the things. He's still keeping all of that secret because why not? And the Sultan is so happy that his daughter's back, Aladdin's back. They have a great big 10-day feast. Happy ending? Not quite. There's a second eviler magician that was never mentioned before. But he's here now. The magician had a brother who somehow finds out that Aladdin killed his brother. Don't know how. Magic, I guess. And he decides he's going to get revenge for his brother, even though his brother totally started it. So he comes to town, and he goes to the house of this holy woman named Fatima. And he's like, okay, here's a knife. get in the house, strip naked, and give me your clothes. She's like, I got a whole closet full of clothes. She's like, nope, I want those. And so she does, just don't kill me. He takes the clothes and then kills her anyway because he's an eviler magician, and that's what he does. And he goes down pretending to bless people and heal people and so on and so forth, again, gathering a huge crowd. And the princess, who's always wanted to meet Fatima, invites her in because why not? She seems like a perfectly lovely holy woman. And rather than do any of the really direct things the magician could have done, he instead decides to convince the princess that what she really needs is a roc's egg in the palace. Now, the princess has never thought about that before, but now that she does think about it, you're right. This palace does need a roc's egg, and I can't possibly be happy until we have one. Why? Don't know. Does it do something? No idea. But they need one. Really bad. And so she's moping around, trying not to tell Aladdin because she knows it's a little silly. She's aware that she's being silly. But Aladdin's like, no, come on, tell me. What is making you unhappy? Whatever it is, I will get it for you. She's like, well, I really want a rock's egg. He's like, isn't that all? I'll just have my genie whip one up. Turns out that's the one wish the genie won't grant. He get real mad. Threatens to kill Aladdin. Apparently, the rock is somehow the genie's master. Don't understand how that works. It's not explained. And he gets real upset that you would dare to force him in servitude to go and summon his master to watch over him all the time. But then he's like, oh, wait, never mind. You were tricked by another magician, weren't you? Yeah, that's what happened. No, we're cool. Then forget about the whole killing thing. But you might want to watch out. There's an evil magician here. So the Aladdin goes back out and is like, oh, you are not Fatima. Cool. Can you heal me? My head's kind of hurting me. Can you lay hands on my head? Stab. And that's the end of the evil magician. Happy ending. So, given all of that, I can see why they switched things up for the animated film. It's a real weird story that does not make a whole lot of sense. You also get, a tighter, cohesive story. And let's be real, the 1992 movie is a classic for a reason. Over 20 years after the movie came out, one of the biggest fan theories was finally confirmed. Those are the same guy. When at the very beginning, when the peddler is giving you his whole spiel about Agrabah, the original intent was for him to be the genie after he was freed. He went off, turned into this guy, and is now trying to sell things because it's actually pretty hard suddenly being a guy with no past and no skills. So he's turned into the merchant, which is why he's the only character in the movie with 4 fingers other than the genie. He's also voiced by Robin Williams. Directors Ron Clement and John Musker finally confirmed this in 2015. It took them that long to finally go, okay, guys, yeah, you're right. Fine, you're right. Robin Williams is easily one of the most memorable parts of the film, rivaled in my mind only by the incredible music. But I'm guessing he didn't consider Disney much of a friend by the end of it. Fresh off the success of Good Morning Vietnam, he had a lot of goodwill with Touchstone Pictures. And he also was really kind of wanting to be in some kind of animated film to have something that his kids could watch that he'd been in. So he decides to be in Aladdin, huge at this point. He's huge. But he agrees to take part for the SAG press scale of $75,000 rather than his asking price of $8 million. And the only thing he asked was that his name and image not be used in the marketing, and that his name not be used in the marketing, and if the genie was used, that it was not more than 25%, did not take up more than 25% of the advertising space. And so Disney immediately agreed to that, and then immediately went back on all of it. Genie was everywhere. They were hyping it so hard, and they were like, okay, well, we can't make him more than 25%, but what we will do is make him real big, and everyone else real tiny. So, screw you. Unsurprisingly, he declined to be in the VHS sequels. He did not get any money off the residuals. He did not get money off the toys. He did not get money off all the merchandising deals. And so in the sequels, he's actually replaced by Dan Castellaneta, Homer Simpson, who's doing his best Robin Williams impression. until they finally apologized a few years later, and he did come back for the very last direct-to-VHS sequel. A lot of the oddball elements of this movie don't actually come from the original story at all. They came from The Thief of Baghdad, a 1940s film that you probably haven't seen, and they safely assumed you haven't seen it, you're not going to know. So The Thief of Baghdad has a thief named Abu, an evil vizier named Jafar, a royal wandering the city in disguise and getting in trouble with the law, a flying carpet, and a genie who only grants 3 wishes. Abu roughly translates to father from Arabic, so it's a little bit of a nod when they named the monkey Abu that it's the only father he's ever had. It's the closest thing, which they, again, allude to in the live action. He's like, oh, this is how you turn out when you've got a monkey for a father figure. The 2019 film, I think, does a better job of giving Jafar a motivation other than just, I'm evil. He's kind of the funhouse mirror version of Aladdin. I miss the antics of Iago. Iago was such a fun part of the original. I get why they scaled him back, but it still was missing something. The original script apparently had a mother character that was cut. There's actually, if you go out, you can actually find there was a song written called Proud of Your Boy, which is Aladdin singing to his mom about how he's going to totally do better and be less of a screw-up. But it got cut because it just didn't work as well. They also, in the movie, reference briefly Aladdin's father because he calls Aladdin a doubting Mustafa. And not really apropos of anything, but I just loved him at the end going, I'm history. No, I'm mythology. Who cares? I wasn't sure how I was going to like the remake, but honestly, I think it pretty well holds up on its own. It pays homage to the original story. It pays homage to the 90s version. And personally, I really love the scene at the beginning, which is straight out of the original SNES game, where they're running on top of the little posts and bouncing off of things. It was straight out of the gameplay from this game, which still holds up, although it's not nearly as hard as I remembered it being. Naturally enough, Disney loves remining their old stuff, so it was only a matter of time before Aladdin and Jasmine and company showed up in their big fairy tale epic, Once Upon a Time. It took until season 6, but they did eventually show up. It's an interesting take on the story, with Jasmine enlisting the common thief Aladdin to help her steal a magical artifact, rather than just randomly falling in love with a guy the first day she meets him. I feels like it's a little more of a realistic meet cute for them. Like, oh, you're a thief? Cool, I need a thief. And then they actually have time to reason to spend together. From his very first appearance in the episode Street Rats, it's clear that he's going to be more of an amalgamation of Aladdin and the 1001 Nights. I mean, he even gets into the Cave of Wonders by saying, open sesame. But I'm okay with it. There was also, weirdly enough, a smattering of Greek mythology thrown in there for some reason with the shears of fate, but oh well. It's Once Upon a Time. What are you going to do? Now, we do get that quintessential scene of Jasmine in the hourglass, which I appreciated because I thought it was such a cool, memorable visual, and so it was nice to see that depicted live action, which we then also got in the live action movie, which I also thought was really cool. They apparently kept the movie's version of the genie because they only show the empty lamp with the manacles on it. The genie never actually shows up. So I get why they did that because it's really hard to fill Robin Williams' shoes, although I think Will Smith did a pretty admirable job for the most part. I was never really clear on whether Sidney Glass, the magic mirror from the first season, he's also the genie of Agrabah, but in a different story that doesn't tie in. I'm not sure how that all works, but they didn't seem to worry about it, so I guess I won't either. The take on the genie mythos is really interesting here as well. Jasmine mentions that in the original tale, wishes come from genies often with a price, requiring a bargain, which is straight up out of the original mythology. But the whole business with the cuffs goes back to the movie version, where the genies appear to be cursed humans rather than a unique and individual race of beings, with more powerful than even the most potent of the jinn. Maybe Aladdin is just too new and inexperienced? I don't know. Getting back to the genie, he's probably the character who's least recognizable from the source material. Genies in the old tales are very, very different from the whimsical, wise-cracking sidekick. They're actually, genie as we think of it is actually an anglicized version of the word jinn, which is this huge, broad category with a whole bunch of subcategories. So the genie that we think of is basically a marid, which is the most powerful and common version of the genie. They were often known to grant wishes if properly motivated. They usually had to be either tricked into it or bargained into it. The most common way was you'd find one in a bottle, you'd let it out, and he's like, I'm going to kill you. He's like, don't kill me. I bet you can't get back in that bottle. It's like, I'll show you. I got back in the bottle. Oh, you closed me in the bottle. If you let me out again, I'll give you 3 wishes. Fine. But you had to be real careful with making the bargain airtight, or they would totally kill you. They were not nice things, exactly. The jinn also encompasses ifrits, which are wicked, malicious spirits. They might be the curses protecting Egyptian pyramids, according to some stories, the things that bring all the death and destruction on anybody who enters there. That may be the ifrit. Some stories may hint that, but it's not really ever clear anywhere, so up to you what you want to believe. They also have ghouls, which are evil shapeshifters who prey on humans. They eat corpses when they can't get fresh meat. They tend to live in graveyards. Real nasty dudes. You've got the hin, which are evil dog spirits that will meet you and you're like, oh, look at the cute puppy. I want to pet the puppy. And then you're in quicksand. Oopsie. You've got the jan, which are more humanoid. They tend to live in the desert. They're super nice. They're usually super helpful. They do like their pranks. They're usually of the harmless variety, but they might get you hurt. They didn't mean to, but oopsie. You've got the Silas, who are your friendly neighborhood shapeshifter. They really want to be helpful. They try so hard to be helpful, but they are so bad at it. They are so bad at being helpful, and they always make things worse. Anytime they show up in a story, things are about to get a whole lot worse, with the best of intentions. They just want to help. Then you've got the palace, which are desert vampires, but not the kind of vampire you're thinking of. They drain your blood by licking your feet. It's kind of kinky. You've got the Kareen, which is supposedly a dark spirit that every person alive possesses. It's the little voice in the back of your head going, hey, just push that guy. You can totally get away with it. It's cool. Some people who are very, very good, very, very powerful, can harness their Kareens and separate them from themselves as a separate entity, leaving them beings of pretty much pure good and having their evil side as their servant. It's apparently really hard to do, and only a handful of people in all of history have ever done it, but, it's an option. You've got the Shaitan, which is an evil jinn. They might be demons and not jinn at all. It's a little unclear. Some stories say one, some stories say the other. Either way, nasty dude you don't want to meet in a dark alley. They are not going to be your friend. And you've got the Vitala, a different vampire spirit. This is one that possesses corpses to be able to walk around in the day. They're often fortune tellers or soothsayers, so if someone's offering to tell them your future, they might be a vampire. They're not good. They're not really good people either. They do have true fortune, so if you're willing to take the risk and you want to know your future, it's a thing you can do, but it's real risky. The best way to get genie wishes is the trickery. Always trickery. But make sure you do get the good deal or they will murder you. So, at this point, I'm going to open it up to questions in the panel. I've got this nice, nifty little catch box, which is a microphone and squishy, so nice and safe. So as I point to people, just throw them the mic.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I just wanted to point out the whole Afrits and the Jinn and all that. If anybody's really interested in that in a fictional level, the Bartimaeus trilogy, it's a young adult novel series. They're really good about that. The narrator is a golem, I think, and he's hilarious. You should totally take a look at it if you liked anything in this.
Yeah, I've heard good things about that. It is on my to-read list, which, to be fair, is very long.
So I've got a question.
Yes.
The genie that was in Aladdin's ring and the source material, was that an Ifrit?
That was a Marid
That was a
that had
Marid as
been
well.
captured and bound into the ring. It was not as powerful as the other genie, but they were, for the most part, the wish-granting genies are all Marids.
Got it.
Anybody else? Questions? Yes? No? Maybe so? Yes, behind you.
Hello.
Hello.
So first of all, I'm really happy that you got to an Arabic mythos because most people don't get to that far. Very happy about that. Did great. I wanted to actually ask how you felt about mythos that don't get as much coverage. Because a lot in like most of popular media, we get a lot of Norse, we get a lot of Greek. That's because we have things like the Poetica, Etica, and we have like Homer's tales that have been like recorded 100 times over. How do you feel about things that don't get a lot of talks, like the Ramayana, which is long as shit, but it's amazing, or like anything Zoroastrian, which is wild.
Yeah, no, I'm a huge fan on the
Gilgamesh.
podcast. I try really, really hard to go all over the globe and not just stick with things. We just did a story from ancient Sumeria. I've done some stuff from South America. I've done some Indian stories from, Indian and the Native American, different parts of the world. I've done some Serbian stories. So yeah, I'm a big fan of the lesser known, lesser utilized stories because there's some really incredibly fascinating stuff out there that does not get the love it deserves.
Real time.
Speaking of which, there's a really great collection of oral folk tales from West Africa called The Girl Who Married a Lion. It's all stories that I have literally not been able to find anywhere else, and they're incredible stories. I've told 2 from the book already. But I highly recommend checking it out if you're interested in obscure folk tales that you cannot find anywhere else because it's only oral tradition except for this one book where the guy spent 10 years living out there collecting these stories. So it's a fantastic book. Check it out.
What was the name of that again?
The Girl Who Married a Lion.
What's your podcast?
Myths Your Teacher Hated. I've got stickers and cards up here if people want. If there are no more questions, I do have stories. It's story time.
Can I throw this back?
Yes.
Where can we get one?
Get one what? That you'll have to ask them. I do not know.
That's amazing.
Good? Yep.
It's really kind of stated.
Yeah, I don't know where the catch boxes come from, but they are fantastic.
It's magic.
It's magic, yeah. It's always magic. If you don't know the answer is magic. All right, so
Advanced technology. Magic.
since we were talking about Africa, I'm going to start with one of my all-time favorite characters, Anansi the Spider. I love Anansi the Spider. So for the, I guess, like 3 of you who don't know, Anansi the Spider is a trickster character out of West Africa. In some stories, he's this really benevolent character who's tricking the other gods to help people. He's the one that brings down stories the first time, brings down fire. In other stories, he is a selfish prick who is real dumb and constantly getting tricked himself. This is one of the latter stories. So, Anansi lived in the same African village as the chameleon. He was rich and owned the finest fields in the area, while Chameleon was poor and worked hard in his meager fields to make ends meet. However, one year, rain fell on Chameleon's fields, which were now abundant with beautiful crops, and to teach Anansi a lesson in humility, the sky god let no rain fall on Anansi's land and crops, so they dried up, turned into dust, and blew away. So Anansi, not at all learning that lesson, decided he was going to take Chameleon's fields for himself. So first he tried to buy the fields, but Chameleon's like, no dude, this is how I eat. Without this, I'm going to die. And he's like, that's cool, I'll double the offer. And he's like, yeah, that's only going to last me a little while, and then I starve to death, so no deal. Anansi does not like being told no. So Anansi one day decides that he's just going to go take it. He's just going to take it. So he goes in to Chameleon's fields and begins harvesting the crops, just straight up stealing them. And Chameleon comes by and he's real angry and he's like tries to chase him out of the fields, like, well, you're stealing my crops. Now, a chameleon, being real sneaky and hidey, leaves no footprints when it walks, unlike Anansi. And so Anansi took Chameleon to tribal court saying, no, this is my field. And when the judge comes out there, he's like, look at all the footprints in there. Those are my footprints. Where are Chameleon's footprints? And the judge is like, Well, I'm pretty sure you're full of it, but I can't prove it, and you are the only one who looks to have been in there, so I guess it's your field. So yeah, Chameleon not at all happy at all. But he, being also quite clever, decides he's going to get back at Anansi. So he digs a deep, deep hole and puts a roof on it. And from the outside, the hole looks real tiny, real shallow. But it's actually a huge underground cavern extending like thousands of feet. Then he takes some vines and flies and he makes them into a cloak. And he starts walking around wearing it's this real pretty, shiny, jeweled colors. And Anansi's like, "That's a sweet cloak, man. How much for the cloak?" Chameleon goes, "You know what? Fine. I need the money. You can buy my cloak. Here, take the cloak. In exchange, you see that little hole right there? All I need you to do is fill that with food. Just a little bit of food so I can get by." And Nanji's like, "Easy. I can do that. I can fill it twice over, in fact. I'm going to give you more than you asked for." And the chameleon's like, "Cool. Do it." Anansi then took the cloak to the chief, who had acted as the judge, and gave him the cloak as a gift to try to get in good. And he's like, "Oh, this is a really cool cloak." So Anansi spends days trying to fill up that hole with food, and it just will not fill up because it's massive. And so at the same time, the chief happens to be walking down the road, and the vines they're old at this point, they're dried out, they break up, the whole cloak falls to pieces. So he is super pissed at Anansi for giving him a bum cloak. So when he comes back, he finds Anansi. He decides, you know what? Screw you, guy. I'm going to give it back to him, even though I got no more proof than I had last time. But yeah. So all of your fields, they're now chameleons. You can keep the one you stole. And now Chameleon is the richest guy in town. And Anansi's got nothing, because he had to clean out his field to try to put food in that hole and not succeed. So maybe he starves to death? I don't know. End of the story. Alright, I think we have time for... let's go with something from Australia. With Ouida the Mockingbird. Ouida was playing a great trick on people who lived near him. He had built himself a number of grass nyunas, which were these little houses, more than 20. He built fires around each of them to make it look like people lived in them, and then he would imitate noises to make it sound like people were there. He'd imitate babies crying, kids playing, people talking, the whole shebang. His whole goal was just to entice as many people as possible into the village so we could murder them. Why? Don't know. Doesn't matter. People would be coming back and they hear this sounds of a village where no village is supposed to be, and they'd go in and investigate. And he'd come across this one guy, and he'd be like, "Oh, hey, who lives here? There's a lot of sound here, but I'm just seeing you." And he's like, "Oh, yeah, no, I'm the only one here. The winds must have stirred the leaves in the trees. That's what you're hearing." And he's like, "No, I know what I heard. That wasn't leaves. That was a baby crying. They don't sound at all alike." And he's like, "Well, you're welcome to come look around here. Come on." And the whole time they're talking, he keeps edging the guy closer and closer to the fire until eventually he just shoves him in the fire and burns him alive. Now, at some point, people start to go, a lot of people are going missing in this part of the world. It's real weird. Maybe we should do something about it. So about this time, Mulyan the Eaglehawk decides he's going to solve the mystery. Because one of his cousins actually disappeared. He's one of the people who just straight up vanished. So he follows the tracks and finds this village where no village is supposed to be. And he hears the sounds and he hears all the noises. Like, who could this be? This is weird. So he comes in and he again finds just Ouida by himself. And he's like, no, I heard lots of people. I'm sure I heard lots of people. And he's like, "No, just me. Look around." So he starts, as the more he's talking, he kind of figures out what's up. He puts two and two together and comes up with murder. So he's realized this guy is probably going to try to kill him. So he pretends to fall for it. He lets himself get backed up toward the fire. He allows himself to get right up there. Till eventually comes the time where Ouida does his usual thing. He grabs the hawk and says, "Even as you served my cousin, now my friends, I serve you." And so he takes the Ouida and throws him right into the fire. And then he turns back home to tell everyone, okay, so this is what happened. There's this fake village. Don't go there. It gets real murdery. And so as he gets some distance away, he hears this huge burst of thunder. Except it's not thunder. It was the back of Ouida's head exploding, which out comes the Ouida bird, the mockingbird, which to this day has a hole in the back of its head just about in the same place as Ouida's, the head that appeared in his head when he caught on fire, by which it just means like black spots. And he imitates all the sounds he hears. So that's where the mockingbird came from. All right, so I believe that is just about my time. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to be around for quite a few panels this weekend. I'm on the app. If you had fun here, please rate us on the app. This is how they know to bring us back again. If you want stickers or cards, they're up here. Feel free.